So before we go to the break, we have a panel of data sharing requirements for the agencies, and I would like to invite the panelists to come here as I do a brief introduction because your folders contain their biographies. So Sarah Greene is from PCORI, and she is one of the leaders in steering the clinical data research networks, of which PScanner is one of them. Gurvaneet is from the Agency for Healthcare Research on Quality, and you can find his biography right there. And Heidi Sofia is from the NIH Computational Biology at the NHGRI, and also our lead science officer. So please welcome our speakers. I don't know if you have slides. Okay, so let me set up the slides as you get started.
We have not rehearsed this together.
Yeah. All right. Panel one. So who comes first?
Okay, on his program it goes Heidi, Gurvaneet, and then me.
Okay.
But we'll do it.
I think we got it all right. So Heidi.
Hi, I'm going to tell you a little bit about recent changes and experiences and opportunities at NIH in data sharing, genomic data sharing. So in 2008 is when the GWAS policy was established, so the policy that governs the sharing of genotype and phenotype data. And it came about because of the realization that there was actually a much more significant privacy risk to this data that had previously been appreciated. So as part of the GWAS policy, there was established the database of genotype and phenotype, or dbGaP, at NCBI as an integral component of this policy. And then recently, there's been now an update of the policy because the GWAS policy is not really sufficient anymore to handle the growing needs of data sharing as it's developing in genomics and omics and other types of biomedical and clinical data types. So before I tell you about the policy change, which is now going to take effect in January and will be called the Genomic Data Sharing Policy, or GDS, I want to tell you about a change in the GWAS policy that's already in place, which is an extension of the dbGaP database to allow other partners to actually hold this kind of controlled access data that previously was only allowed to be shared through dbGaP. And so this is the Trusted Partners Program. And currently there's two trusted partners. One of them is CG Hub. The other one is the BioNimbus, more recently awarded BioNimbus Genome Data Commons at University of Chicago. So just to place those in context, here's a map, and the theme I'm trying to illustrate here is expansion and growth, and some of the things that actually motivated the need for changing the GWAS policy to encompass more in the genomic data sharing policy. So here's a map, and you're looking at the two trusted partners, which are the other places besides dbGaP that are allowed to hold controlled access genomic data. And one of them is the UC Santa Cruz CG Hub, the other is the GDC at University of Chicago. And currently, these two partners are involved in a large project that's an international collaboration with other cloud centers, other genome data and cloud centers, 3 in Europe, EBI, Barcelona and Germany, and 2 in Asia, in Korea and Japan. So these groups have united for the analysis of a very large set of data, which is in cancer genomics, and so they are collaborating to analyze and reanalyze 2,500 cancer cases, which amounts to about 5,000 BAM files, large BAM files, and doing kind of a soup to nuts analysis back to the very raw form of the data so that it's all uniformly processed and provenance is tracked and tools are implemented in ways that even if data is analyzed in one particular center, in one particular geographical location, that the results are provably uniform. And this level of integration is needed because it's to put together such large amounts of information to do analysis across tumor types. So this is kind of showing a trend and why there are needed changes in policy and why needed changes in technology and how lots of things have to come together in how we manage and share and collaborate with our data. So now I want to tell you about what more specifically has changed between the GWAS policy and the GDS policy. So these are kind of expansion of scope, but also kind of refinement in several areas. So first of all, there's a change to go from a very kind of limited perspective of genotype and phenotype to a much broader perspective involving all genomic data types. So DNA-seq, RNA-seq, proteomics, all these data types are potentially encompassed, by the new GDS policy, both human and non-human. So then there's changes to the consent, where for existing consents, there's not a change. But going forwards, there's going to be a push towards establishing consents that truly create a platform for data sharing up front. So up front, the default should be more along the lines of consented for broad research use or general resource use when possible. So exceptions can be granted, but trying to make that more of a consistent platform so that it's not so hard to then go back to incredible diversity and heterogeneity in the consents. And then the consents should also address up front whether data can be shared openly or in controlled access. So there's a change in data submission. Well, basically, data should be submitted essentially as soon as quality control metrics are completed. But it's data release where instead of immediate data release, but then using a publication moratorium, now there's a no publication moratorium, but there can be a 6-month deferral of data release. So that's kind of the highlights of the core changes in this policy. And so the policy also speaks to data scale. So it's really intended for larger scale data. And so there's metrics, kind of rule of thumb metrics that have been developed to define what's considered larger scale and what's considered smaller scale in terms of this policy. So with sequence data, if you have relatively few genes, you need more participants. Or if you have more genes, then you hit the trigger at fewer participants. With the number of variant sites makes a difference. So the number of samples or isolates, for example, with infectious organisms, and so on. So another part of the context for data sharing at NIH has already been raised by Susanna, and this is the BD2K initiative, which is NIH's Big Data to Knowledge initiative. And this is a fundamental investment in data science as it relates to promoting biomedical and clinical research. And so this initiative is trans NIH. It's organized kind of on top of, outside of any individual institute, and yet it's also organized differently than the Common Fund or roadmap projects that that you may be familiar with as well. So it's a big step for NIH and a major topic and a topic of a lot of discussion. And so with all the things, and there's a lot of different components to it, and we're not going to touch on all of them by any means, with all the things that you need to do with large-scale data, including building some sort of commons where you can work with this data and break down the stovepiping and break down silos of all different kinds. One particular facet of this that I'd like to mention and highlight at this point is that an idea that's being discussed or is attracting some interest is the idea that data sharing plans in proposals that are submitted to NIH really should be machine readable, so that to have kind of a viable system for managing data sharing from the perspective of grants that come in and proposals that are submitted, that you actually really need that in itself to be machine readable and machine computable so that you can actually know what you have and know and be able to better track and manage how successful NIH is able to be with these data sharing plans. So finally, I just want to kind of give you a picture of scope, of scale of this data. Basically, this is unfortunately a United States perspective, so I criticize it from that point of view. For example, the TCGA project, the Cancer Genomics Project, that is actually just the American data and has excluded the international data, which is equal to this or greater. So I apologize for the NIH-centric view, but here is a picture of the sequence universe from the NIH perspective. So in terms of size, just sheer size, TCGA has the largest amount of data currently at about 1 petabyte stored in CG Hub, with an endpoint estimated at 2.5 petabytes. And then there's these other large projects that you may have heard about that that's showing their relative scale. The next largest one is 1,000 genomes, followed by the Alzheimer's sequencing project and GTEx project and the NHLBI ESP program, and et cetera. So this is a slide that we're updating on a quarterly basis to show the growth, but you can see I've showed star formation with the 100K Genomes Project, England, and so of course this is just one solar system, and out there in the sky you can see plenty of others as well. So thank you very much.
I don't speak Mac, so I might need a little assist here. Thank you. That one right there, right above it. Yeah, that's me. Thank you. I might be the only non-Mac user in the room. Wow. Okay. Well, good morning, everybody. Thank you for having me. It's great to be here to talk about data sharing from PCORI's perspective, the Patient-Centered Outcomes Research Institute. It's a mouthful, so I'll abbreviate it for the rest of the talk, but I'll try to keep the acronyms to a minimum. I was really excited when we did the intros to hear what an inclusive environment. People have been brought together today from library sciences and all the biomedical informatics, and then of course the patient community and patient advocacy community. So I think I look forward to a rich discussion over the next couple of days from those multiple perspectives. As I stand here, PCORI is actually coincidentally holding its Board of Governors meeting to talk about at a national level some of the ideas I'll be sharing with you today. So it was a nice, happy coincidence from that vantage. So just to give you a bit of context about PCORI and the context for our data sharing requirements, we're an independent research institute that was authorized by Congress through the Affordable Care Act, but we're not a government agency. We fund comparative effectiveness research, or CER, and we do so engaging patients and other stakeholders throughout the entire research process, from ideation to implementation of the results. So we're really working side by side with our patients and with many stakeholders. And what we aim to do is to answer the true real-world questions that matter to patients, their families, and those who care for them, and do so based on the patient's different perspectives and circumstances, as no two patients are alike. So as you can see in this diagram, we have a number of stakeholders, which makes for, it can be complexifying, but I think, again, also enriches our point of view, because we bring together patients, science researchers, hospitals and health systems, policymakers, and so all of that is to illustrate that we have a large community, and that kind of feeds into a more complex mandate that we have. And so this is a little bit of an excerpt from our authorizing legislation, again, to sort of set the stage for why data sharing perspectives are taking shape as they are. But because our mandate is to provide patients, policymakers, providers, that information they need at the point of care that's tailored to the patient's circumstances, we have to really be very thoughtful about the relevance and the rigor of the evidence, but also the speed at which it is brought to bear at the point of care for patients. We're attempting to change practice. We're a new organization. We've only been in place for about 4 years, but as you know, changing practice is a long marathon. It's by no means a sprint. So we're thinking every day about how can we uphold our legislative mandate to change practice. This slide refers to our need to at least every 5 years, if not more often, that we must assess the extent to which our findings are being disseminated and used in practice. Now, we're only at the very beginning of getting results. We funded pilot projects initially. Those are coming to fruition. Our first cycle of research awards will be producing results shortly, but in the meantime, we need to think about, okay, how can we use all of that whole stakeholder universe to help us be conduits and get the research into practice? How can we help the policymakers? How can we help the patients? And so I would say that we have these strategic goals that play right into this, the three of which are increasing the quantity, quality, and timeliness of research information, and I'll speak more to that in a moment. Similarly, speeding the implementation and use of evidence, as I mentioned a minute ago. New agency, our authorizing legislation goes through 2017, and then we'll be looking at reauthorization, hopefully. But this is in research epochs. This is a very rapid and compressed timeline. So we're working as quickly as we can, both at the front end to get research funded, and then at the back end to get the results out there. And in so doing, we hope to influence research that's funded by others. So I want to talk a little bit about the authorizing legislation obligations that we are beholden to these. First, we must conduct peer review of primary research, assessing the scientific integrity and also adherence to our methodology standards, which I'm not going to go into in detail, but happy to talk to you about those on offline or on a break. Importantly, this is the what people call the PCORI 90-day rule. It sets people a little bit on edge sometimes, but we have, again, in our mandate that we must release the primary research findings within 90 days once we've received them. Or once the conduct of those results has been concluded. And so what does that mean? I'll talk about in a minute. But basically what we're obligated to do is make those results available to patients, clinicians, and the public in a comprehensible, useful way. So, the technical jargon won't really work. As you probably are all familiar with, if you've ever tried to publish an article, it often takes a little longer than 90 days, and a few journals probably find their way into the mix there. The journal reviews don't, we're working with some journals, but right now they don't routinely take into consideration our methodology standards, so that's an area that we need to sort of puzzle out a little bit. And we're very, very cognizant that releasing the primary research findings ahead of journal publication may, in fact, impede or thwart a researcher's opportunity to publish their data. And we want to make sure that this obligation of PCORI's doesn't constitute prior publication. So we're actively wrestling with that. We also know that our process and processes of going through peer review with a journal may yield different interpretations of a study's results. So again, the central question for us right now is upholding our legislative mandate and simultaneously preserving the researcher's ability to publish their results. So this is Again, we want to align our open science philosophy with making results available, but also preserving scientific integrity. We are consulting with experts right now to consider how consent and privacy can be structured and enfolded into these processes, and consider some upcoming results, an upcoming report from the Institute of Medicine on sharing data from clinical trials in a responsible fashion. One of our board members has been deeply involved in that report, and he's helped us sort of bring that alignment to bear. And then we're also convening a data privacy forum in December to discuss the broad considerations for data privacy, security, use, sharing, so all of these, the issues that I think will come up in the next 2 days, the sociocultural issues as well as the technical issues. So I think, we're marching ahead toward an open science philosophy, again, while attending to the needs of the scientific community and our many stakeholders. If you do apply principally committed to transparency and expediency, along with the rigor and usability of our results. And again, we can only stress that public input into these processes are going to be what makes them better for all concerned. So please do get involved, and thank you so much.
So I may need help with the slides. Well, good morning. So I'm from the Agency for Healthcare Research and Quality. And what I'll do, I was asked to talk about data sharing requirements, and that is a fairly small talk for me because AHRQ is still developing its policy. So if that's what you wanted, the bottom line is it's still in development. Okay, some formatting issues. But it's not, so there are factors that we have to consider, and you've heard some of them. When do we release the findings to the public, the research findings? What's the cost and feasibility of sharing the data? And the major issues, I think, are also the privacy and confidentiality of the patient's data. And often we deal with healthcare delivery organizations, so there are proprietary information to be considered. So it's not a simple sharing of data amongst researchers that we have to think about. But this is not to say that AHRQ doesn't encourage or like data sharing. And so I pulled up the boilerplate language from the Scalable Distributed Research Networks, RFA, that the scanner project that Dr. Lucilla Ono Machado was the PI of. And it clarifies that it depends upon, it's more incumbent upon the PI. So we were not making it a requirement. We encouraged it, but the plan had to be formulated depending upon the needs of the project. And so some of the FOAs that we have released have been more stringent, some less so, but it's been more FOA to FOA specific as opposed to an agency-wide policy. So I thought before we go into, what's the next step? Do the funders keep on raising the bar? Maybe we should take a step back and say, why is it that, and what is it that we can do to help data sharing, apart from just saying, must share data or you will not get funding or you'll get penalized. So it might be helpful if we take a step back to think about the principal investigator's perspective. So the question might be, why do you want to share data? And it should not just be because the funder requests or requires me to do so. I think there are bigger incentives that the funders should align and create to foster data sharing. And that would be, the first answer to that question should be, it actually helps me. It's not because I must do it, but I want to do it. So if it helps me in my work, do more science, better science, faster science, It helps my career. I get recognized for data sharing. It helps to advance the field. I'm part of a community, and the community as a whole progresses, not just me. And finally, that it satisfies the requirements. I think that's the state we should aspire to, and from the funder side, try and encourage. The other part of it is I think there's a shift in the paradigm. Previously, the competition was on just protecting the data and mining it. So I can speak from my experience with the epidemiology world, especially in the cancer epidemiologists. One of the quotations I heard was, the most prolific epidemiologist would like to be buried with the data set, not share it with anybody else. And I think that was the paradigm previously, that once you got a hold of a data set, then keep on publishing on it and get your future grant funding or contract funding from it. I think the paradigm has shifted, and it's just that we as a field have moved more slowly in the health services research area. The new paradigm is not so much competing on the data, but it's actually competing on the tools to create knowledge from the data. And so I think we need to sort of move away from protecting the data and not sharing it to, okay, how do we actually make this into something actionable and useful? And for that, we need to encourage sharing the data and also collaborating across existing silos. So some of the incentives that we can think of from the funder side would be, well, first of all, improve quality of clinical data. And that actually goes back to one of the reasons why people are hesitant to share data is because they don't really trust, in quotations, somebody else's data. I know I collected the data. I know what it means. I know what I can do with that. I don't know what you did. So in clinical data, though, it's not the researchers who are generating the data. It's the clinicians, it's the patients, it's the healthcare delivery organizations that are generating the data. So if we want to encourage more efficient research building off of health services and healthcare delivery, we need to improve the quality of data at the point of care. And the incentive to do that is not because someone wants to publish off of it. The incentive to do that is because someone wants to improve patient care from that. So if we can encourage bidirectionality of the data, such that we're not always taking the data from the health system and publishing, but also making sure that it goes back to the clinician, back to the patient to actually improve quality of care, that itself would be a big incentive to improve the quality of data. I think the other thing that we can do is to recognize people who have created good quality data. And so we don't really have good incentives and means of doing so, and whether it's the publishers, whether it's the funders, whether it's the peers, but we need to come up with criteria to do that. The other part of that would be to engage and support the relevant end users. And so we have to bridge the research infrastructure and the healthcare delivery infrastructure and make it useful for both. So not always thinking about researchers and funders and publishers, but thinking of the broader ecosystem, as you just heard from my colleague from PCORI. And the way that I think funders can do that is to support perhaps more large-scale, multi-site and multidisciplinary projects. So you're actually breaking the silos by the projects and making the people who haven't worked before work together, as opposed to speaking and talking within your own communities. I think other things that we can do as funders are to support the development of tools, the analytic tools and the methods to use the data to create knowledge, to support the stakeholder engagement. And I think all of this goes back to sustainability. If the data infrastructure and the data sharing are done right, these become sustainable enterprises that you don't always have to come back to research funders to sustain that. It may be the healthcare delivery organizations, it may be the clinicians, and we have had some examples of that from our projects that we supported from the ARA investment. And I think one of the most important things is to build trust in the community. So if you build this trusted space to share innovations, lessons learned, and collaborations, then the data sharing becomes less of an issue. It's how do we move forward in the field. And I'll just end with an example of data sharing in a trusted space through the EDM forum. So this was the Electronic Data Methods Forum. It was one of 12 projects that were funded from the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act. This started in 2010. These 12 projects were collectively about $100 million of investment, and the scanner project that Dr. Ono Machado was referring to earlier was one of those 12. And the forum brought together and convened the investigators and sort of built the collaboration and trust to share innovations and lessons learned. Did it through a variety of means, symposia, webinars, created diverse products, so some data use agreements, governance toolkits. But I think most importantly, it created a new journal. And so this started in 2013. And already we have more than 25,000 downloads from it. 55 papers have been published. It's called eGEMS. And so this is another example of the authors in these were not all from the AHRQ funded projects. There are NIH funded, PCORI funded, even clinical society funded projects. And those projects have become willing to participate in this because they want to share lessons from the front line to help others. And talk about things that aren't published often. It's not always the research ending that matters. It's the journey that gets us to the research that doesn't get shared, and that is part of what the eGEMS is doing. One of the things that we are also doing is to support collaborative methods projects. So I'll just end there. I think there'll be an interesting discussion. I didn't want to take too much time on this. Thanks.
Great. So thanks for the great presentations. And I wanted to take some minutes for questions from the audience. You might all be interested. Why don't I ask for the microphone to be sent out to Davira so we can do the people on the web stream can participate and not wait for a long time. So Davira Gabriel from UC Davis.
Thank you. I'd like to ask a question of Sarah. So one of the things I haven't really been paying attention to in PCORI, because I've been looking at other things, was this publishing requirement. And I want to ask this question carefully as not to offend our host or other folks that are here. But I've been aware and have learned about some of the open access kinds of initiatives in publishing, PLOS and, some of the other areas. And I wonder, can you speak a little bit to the considerations being made to looking at some of the alternative publishing platforms that maybe wouldn't get embroiled in some of the operational and maybe political peer review kind of considerations and all of that? I wonder if that's kind of on the table or not.
Is this working? Okay, great. Yeah, thank you for that question. I mean, I would say, just definitely yes, that those open access journals are are a model that we're looking at. I mean, I think, I would like to see more of that take hold me personally as a researcher see more of that take hold in the community. I think inevitably though there'll have to be some way that we look at journals that are not open access and try to figure out where we can bring the best of the open access mindset to bear, along with knowing that there are journals that are probably unlikely to move to that model. But definitely we'll try to extract what we can from the insights we can from. Sure, absolutely. I mean, there's something about, getting your results in quickly, but, and maybe you have other concerns about the peer review level of rigor it might go through the peer review because of the speed they're trying to push things through. So I think it is a balance of speed and rigor and also availability, I think, and I shouldn't say availability and also reach. What are the end users reading? If we want people to look at journals, the obscure journals that maybe are open access versus looking at JAMA, which they have delivered to their inbox. I think there's just going to be trade-offs through and through. Yeah.
Other questions? Maybe I should defend the host. Because as some of you know, I edit the Journal of the American Medical Informatics Association, which does have an open access possibility, but some people don't want to. It's an author fee in order to make it open access, and you would be surprised on how many people would use grant funding for other purposes other than making it open access. So I would advocate that whenever is a grant funded project, that be one of the requirements. So. Yeah, and there will be an open access journal coming up as well, because the editor is very into open access. right.